This is Mental Forge, where weakness burns and warriors are built. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, and something fundamental has shifted. The doubt that usually creeps in with your first conscious breath is gone. The hesitation that normally clouds your decisions has vanished. Instead, you move through your day with the quiet confidence of someone who already knows the outcome. You speak differently. You walk differently. You make choices from a place of certainty rather than fear. This is not fantasy. This is the power of acting as if you have already won. There is a secret that the most successful people throughout history have discovered, often without realizing it consciously. They learned to embody their victory before it manifested in their external world. They understood that success is not something you achieve and then feel good about. Success is something you feel first, then achieve. Today, we are going to explore this profound shift in consciousness, and by the time we finish this journey together, you will understand exactly how to harness this transformational force in your own life. The promise I make to you is this: when you truly grasp and implement what we discussed today, you will experience a fundamental rewiring of how your mind approaches, challenges, opportunities, and your entire relationship with success. You will develop an unshakable inner knowing that permeates every decision you make. Your subconscious mind will begin working for you rather than against you. Fear will lose its grip on your actions, and you will start making choices from faith rather than scarcity. This is not positive thinking or wishful hoping. This is strategic consciousness applied to the architecture of achievement. Let me begin with a story that illustrates this principle in action. In the early 1900s, a young immigrant arrived in America with nothing but burning ambition and an unusual way of thinking about his circumstances. Henry Ford had a vision of putting America on wheels, but he faced a problem that seemed insurmountable. He wanted to create an 8-cylinder engine in one solid block, something his engineers told him was impossible. But Ford had already won in his mind. He had already seen millions of Americans driving his automobiles. He had already felt the satisfaction of revolutionizing transportation. So when his engineers said it could not be done, Ford simply replied that they would continue working until they found a way. For months, his team produced nothing but failures and reasons why it could not work. Ford remained unmoved. He acted as if the solution already existed and they simply needed to discover it. Eventually, his engineers found the way, and the V8 engine became reality. Ford succeeded because he operated from the consciousness of someone who had already won. This is the essence of what we are exploring today. When you act as if you have already won, you are not engaging in self-deception or fantasy. You are aligning your consciousness with the laws that govern achievement and manifestation. You are programming your subconscious mind to seek solutions rather than problems, opportunities rather than obstacles, and evidence of success rather than reasons for failure. Your subconscious mind, that vast reservoir of power beneath your conscious awareness, does not distinguish between what you vividly imagine and what you actually experience. When you consistently act as if you have already achieved your goals, you are sending clear signals to this powerful part of your psyche. You are essentially training your mind to recognize and create the conditions that will bring your vision into reality. Napoleon Hill spent 25 years studying the most successful people of his era and discovered that they all shared this common trait. They had developed the ability to see their success so clearly and feel it so intensely that it became more real to them than their current circumstances. They lived from their vision rather than their conditions. They made decisions from their destination rather than their departure point. Think about how this applies to your own life right now. If you knew with absolute certainty that you would succeed in your goals, how would you behave today? How would you speak to people? What decisions would you make? What opportunities would you pursue? What would you stop doing? The answers to these questions reveal the gap between how you are currently operating and how you would operate from a consciousness of victory. Thomas Edison understood this principle intuitively. When he set out to create the light bulb, he did not conduct experiments to see if it might be possible. He conducted experiments because he knew it was inevitable. He famously said that he had not failed 10,000 times, he had found 10,000 ways that did not work. This was not mere optimism or positive thinking. This was the consciousness of someone who had already won, who was simply working through the process of bringing that victory into physical reality. The science behind this principle is fascinating and reveals why it works so effectively. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, and these neurons form patterns based on your repeated thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. When you consistently act as if you have already won, you are literally rewiring your brain to support that reality. Your reticular activating system, that network of neurons in your brainstem, filters the massive amount of information coming at you every moment and decides what deserves your conscious attention. When you program this system by acting as if you have already won, it begins to highlight opportunities, resources, and connections that align with your vision. Suddenly, you start noticing things that were always there, but were filtered out by a consciousness focused on problems rather than possibilities. If you find value in what we are exploring together today, I encourage you to subscribe and join our growing community of individuals committed to transforming their minds and their results. We dive deep into these principles regularly, and your subscription helps us continue creating content that serves your growth and success. Let us examine how this principle shows up in the realm of wealth building, because money is simply energy, and energy flows toward those who operate from abundance consciousness rather than scarcity consciousness. When you act as if you are already wealthy, you begin making financial decisions from a different paradigm. You invest in your education and skills because wealthy people continuously upgrade their capabilities. You automate your savings and investments because wealthy people understand the power of systems over willpower. You audit your expenses not from fear of not having enough, but from the perspective of optimizing your resources for maximum growth and freedom. Bob Proctor spent decades teaching these principles and discovered that people who struggled financially almost always had one thing in common. They made decisions from their current bank account rather than their financial vision. They operated from scarcity consciousness, which created more scarcity. Those who built wealth consistently made decisions as if they were already financially free, which created the conditions for actual financial freedom. Consider the story of Andrew Carnegie, who came to America as a poor Scottish immigrant but eventually became one of the richest men in the world. Carnegie did not wait until he had money to think like a wealthy person. He studied wealthy people, adopted their thought patterns, and made decisions as if he was already among them. When he was still working as a telegraph operator, he invested his small savings in sleeping car companies and railroad stocks, not because he had extra money to gamble with, but because he was thinking like someone who understood how wealth was created through ownership rather than wages. The key insight here is that Carnegie was not pretending to be rich while acting poor. He was embodying the consciousness of wealth while working systematically to build actual wealth. There is a crucial distinction between fantasy and strategic consciousness. Fantasy ignores reality and takes no action. Strategic consciousness acknowledges current reality while operating from future possibility and taking consistent action aligned with that possibility. This brings us to a fundamental principle of success psychology. Your identity drives your behavior, and your behavior creates your results. Most people try to change their results by changing their behavior, but they struggle because their identity remains unchanged. When you act as if you have already won, you are shifting your identity first, which makes the behavioral changes natural and sustainable. James Clear illuminated this principle in his research on habit formation. He discovered that the most effective way to build new habits is not to focus on what you want to achieve, but on who you want to become. Instead of saying you want to write a book, you start identifying as a writer. Instead of saying you want to lose weight, you start identifying as a healthy person. Instead of saying you want to build wealth, you start identifying as an investor and entrepreneur. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, understood this principle 2,000 years ago. In his personal writings, he consistently reminded himself to act in accordance with his highest vision of himself, regardless of external circumstances. He did not wait for conditions to be perfect before embodying the qualities of a wise leader. He practiced wisdom in every moment, which developed his capacity for actual wisdom. The practical application of this principle requires what psychologists call implementation intentions, specific plans for how you will behave in various situations. When you act as if you have already won, you must define what that looks like in concrete terms. How does someone who has already achieved your goals handle rejection? How do they respond to setbacks? How do they manage their time? How do they treat other people? How do they make decisions under pressure? Let me share with you a powerful daily practice that will help you embody this consciousness. Every morning, before you check your phone or engage with the external world, spend 10 minutes in what I call victory visualization. Close your eyes and step into the version of yourself who has already achieved your most important goals. Feel how that person feels. See what they see. Experience their level of confidence and certainty. Notice how they breathe, how they hold their body, how they think about challenges and opportunities. Now, carry that identity with you throughout your day. Make your decisions from that consciousness. Speak from that authority. Act from that confidence. This is not about arrogance or false confidence. True confidence comes from knowing that regardless of external circumstances, you have the internal resources to handle whatever comes your way. When you act as if you have already won, you develop this unshakable inner knowing because you are constantly proving to yourself that you can maintain your vision and values even when things do not go as planned. Winston Churchill exemplified this principle during the darkest days of World War II. When Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany and invasion seemed imminent, Churchill did not act like the leader of a nation about to be defeated. He acted as if victory was inevitable, and he communicated that certainty to his people. His speeches were not filled with hope or wishful thinking. They were filled with the absolute conviction of someone who had already seen the outcome. This consciousness became contagious and played a crucial role in Britain's eventual victory. The neuroscience behind Churchill's approach reveals why it was so effective. When you operate from certainty rather than hope, your brain activates different neural networks. Hope activates the same regions associated with anxiety and uncertainty, because hope implies doubt. Certainty activates the prefrontal cortex regions associated with executive function and strategic thinking. Your brain literally works better when you operate from knowing rather than hoping. This principle also applies powerfully to how you handle setbacks and apparent failures. When you act as if you have already won, temporary setbacks become data points rather than defeats. They become feedback rather than failure. They become course corrections rather than stop signs. This is because you are operating from a frame of reference that sees the bigger picture rather than getting lost in temporary circumstances. Edison understood this deeply. When his laboratory burned down, destroying millions of dollars of equipment and years of research, he did not despair. He called his family to come watch the fire because, as he said, such a spectacular fire was rare, and they might never see another one like it. The next day, he was already making plans to rebuild, because the fire could destroy his equipment, but not his consciousness of inevitable success. This story illustrates another crucial aspect of acting as if you have already won. It develops what psychologists call cognitive flexibility and emotional resilience. When you are attached to specific outcomes, but not to specific paths, you become infinitely adaptable. You can pivot, adjust, and find new routes to your destination without losing momentum or motivation. Let us explore how this principle applies to developing wealth consciousness specifically. True wealth consciousness is not about having money. It is about understanding that you are a creative being capable of generating value in unlimited ways. When you act as if you are already wealthy, you begin to see money as a tool rather than a goal, as energy rather than matter, as a byproduct of value creation rather than something you chase directly. J.P. Morgan, one of the most powerful financiers in American history, operated from this consciousness throughout his career. He did not think small and hope to get big gradually. He thought big from the beginning and found ways to make his big thinking practical. When other financiers saw risk, Morgan saw opportunity. When they saw problems, he saw solutions. When they acted from scarcity, he acted from abundance. This consciousness allowed him to finance entire industries and reshape the American economy. The practical application of wealth consciousness involves several key shifts in how you think about and handle money. First, you begin investing in assets rather than just working for wages. Wealthy consciousness understands that true security comes from owning things that generate income rather than trading time for money indefinitely. This might start with automating even small amounts into index funds or beginning to develop skills that create intellectual property. Second, you start thinking in terms of value creation rather than just value extraction. Instead of asking how you can make more money, you ask how you can solve bigger problems for more people. This shift in focus naturally leads to increased income because the market rewards those who create the most value for the greatest number of people. Third, you develop what economists call delayed gratification and what wealth builders call compound thinking. You make decisions based on their long-term consequences rather than their immediate pleasure. You invest in your education, your skills, your relationships, and your systems because you understand that these investments compound over time. This brings us to the story of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who started with nothing but built a transportation empire by thinking like an empire builder long before he had an empire. Vanderbilt did not wait until he owned a railroad to think strategically about transportation systems. He studied logistics, understood economic trends, and positioned himself at the intersection of growing demand and limited supply. He acted as if he was already a major player in the transportation industry, which gave him the vision and confidence to make bold moves that others considered too risky. The psychological principle at work here is called future self-continuity. Research shows that people who have a vivid, detailed sense of their future self make better long-term decisions. They save more money, exercise more consistently, and act more ethically because they feel connected to the person they will become. When you act as if you have already won, you are strengthening this connection to your future self and making it easier to choose long-term benefits over short-term pleasures. Now, let me share with you a specific framework for implementing this consciousness in your daily life. I call it the Victory Protocol, and it consists of 4 components that work together to rewire your mind for success. The first component is identity architecture. Every morning, you consciously choose who you are going to be that day. Not what you are going to do, but who you are going to be. Are you going to be someone who has already built a successful business? Are you going to be someone who has already achieved financial freedom? Are you going to be someone who has already mastered their craft? You decide on your identity first, then act from that identity throughout the day. The second component is decision authority. Throughout the day, whenever you face a decision, you pause and ask, how would someone who has already achieved my goals handle this situation? Then you make that choice, regardless of how it feels in the moment. This trains your decision-making faculties to operate from your vision rather than your circumstances. The third component is evidence collection. At the end of each day, you write down 3 pieces of evidence that your vision is becoming reality. This might be a small action you took, a conversation you had, an opportunity you noticed, or a skill you developed. This practice trains your mind to focus on progress rather than problems and to see evidence of success rather than reasons for doubt. The fourth component is vision maintenance. Once a week, you spend extended time reconnecting with your vision, feeling it deeply, and adjusting your strategies based on what you have learned. This ensures that you stay connected to your larger purpose while remaining flexible in your approaches. The beauty of this protocol is that it works regardless of your current circumstances. Whether you are just starting out or you are already successful but want to reach the next level, acting as if you have already won accelerates your progress by aligning all of your internal resources with your desired outcome. Leonardo da Vinci embodied this principle in everything he created. When he painted the Mona Lisa, he did not paint like an aspiring artist hoping to create something good. He painted as if he was already recognized as the greatest artist of his time. When he designed flying machines, he did not sketch like someone who thought flight might be possible someday. He designed as if he understood the principles of flight completely and was simply working out the mechanical details. This consciousness of mastery drove him to achievements that seemed impossible to his contemporaries. The neurological basis for Leonardo's approach involves what neuroscientists call top-down processing. Most people operate from bottom-up processing, where their current circumstances determine their thoughts and feelings. But when you act as if you have already won, you engage top-down processing, where your vision and beliefs shape how you interpret and respond to circumstances. This literally changes your brain activity and makes you more creative, resourceful, and effective. This principle also transforms how you handle the inevitable challenges and setbacks that come with pursuing ambitious goals. When you operate from the consciousness of someone who has already won, obstacles become puzzles to solve rather than barriers to overcome. Criticism becomes feedback rather than attack. Competition becomes inspiration rather than threat. Market downturns become buying opportunities rather than reasons to panic. Consider the example of Napoleon Bonaparte, who revolutionized military strategy by thinking like someone who had already conquered Europe before he controlled even a small portion of it. Napoleon did not plan individual battles, he planned entire campaigns. He did not think about winning the next engagement, he thought about how each engagement fit into his larger strategic vision. This comprehensive thinking allowed him to coordinate complex military operations that seemed impossible to his enemies. The strategic principle Napoleon understood is that when you act as if you have already won, you naturally think in systems rather than just tactics, in campaigns rather than just battles, and decades rather than just days. This expanded perspective gives you enormous advantages because most people are trapped in short-term thinking and reactive behavior patterns. Your subscription to this channel supports our mission to help people like you develop these advanced success principles and apply them in practical ways. The community we are building here consists of individuals who understand that success is first a mental game and second, a practical one. I invite you to join us by subscribing and engaging with the transformational ideas we explore together. Let us now examine how this consciousness affects your relationships and your ability to influence and inspire others. When you act as if you have already won, you naturally attract people who resonate with that energy and vision. You also repel people who are committed to limitation and scarcity thinking. This is not about being arrogant or superior. It is about operating from a different frequency that naturally aligns you with opportunities and people who support your growth. Abraham Lincoln demonstrated this principle throughout his political career. Even when he was a relatively unknown lawyer from Illinois, Lincoln carried himself with the dignity and wisdom of someone who was destined for greatness. He spoke with the moral authority of someone who had already earned the right to lead a nation through its greatest crisis. This consciousness helped him attract the support and resources necessary to win the presidency and guide America through the Civil War. The psychological mechanism at work here is called the law of resonance. People are naturally drawn to those who embody the qualities they aspire to develop in themselves. When you act as if you have already won, you become a magnet for others who are committed to high achievement and personal excellence. You also become a catalyst for their own transformation because your example gives them permission to expand their own vision of what is possible. This brings us to another crucial aspect of this principle. It must be grounded in consistent action and continuous growth. Acting as if you have already won is not about pretending you have nothing left to learn or improve. It is about approaching your growth from a position of confidence rather than desperation, from abundance rather than scarcity, from knowing rather than hoping. Theodore Roosevelt exemplified this balance perfectly. He acted with the confidence of someone who was already a great leader, but he never stopped learning, growing, and pushing himself to new levels of excellence. He read voraciously, sought out challenging experiences, and surrounded himself with people who could teach him new skills and perspectives. His confidence did not make him complacent. It made him more willing to take on greater challenges and responsibilities. The practical implementation of this principle requires what psychologists call cognitive reframing, combined with behavioral consistency. Cognitive reframing means consciously choosing to interpret events in ways that support your vision rather than undermine it. Behavioral consistency means taking actions every day that align with the person you are becoming, even when you do not feel like it. Here is a powerful weekly exercise that will help you develop both of these capabilities. Every Sunday evening, review the upcoming week, and identify the 3 most important outcomes you want to achieve. Then, for each outcome, write a detailed description of how someone who has already achieved your larger goals would approach that particular challenge or opportunity. What would they focus on? What would they ignore? How would they prepare? How would they execute? How would they follow up? Then commit to acting from that consciousness throughout the week. This exercise trains what neuroscientists call executive function, your brain's ability to plan, prioritize, and execute complex tasks while maintaining focus on your larger objectives. People who have strong executive function consistently outperform those with higher IQ but weaker executive function, because success is more about execution than intelligence. The story of Nikola Tesla illustrates this principle in the realm of innovation and creative achievement. Tesla did not experiment to discover what might be possible. He envisioned complete electrical systems in his mind and then worked to bring those visions into reality. He famously said that he could build, refine, and perfect his inventions entirely in his imagination before ever creating physical prototypes. This consciousness allowed him to develop innovations that were decades ahead of his time. Tesla's approach reveals another key aspect of acting as if you have already won. It develops what cognitive scientists call mental simulation capabilities. When you regularly visualize yourself as having already achieved your goals, you strengthen your brain's ability to create detailed mental models of complex processes and outcomes. This enhanced mental simulation capacity makes you more innovative, strategic, and effective in all areas of your life. The financial implications of this principle are profound and practical. When you act as if you are already financially free, you begin making money decisions that wealthy people make. You automate your investing so that building wealth happens without relying on willpower or mood. You focus on increasing your income through value creation rather than just cutting expenses. You think in terms of assets and cash flow rather than just salary and savings. You invest in your education and skills because you understand that your earning capacity is your most valuable asset. Charles M. Schwab built a steel empire by thinking like someone who already understood how to create and manage industrial wealth long before he had any significant assets. When he was still working for Andrew Carnegie, Schwab studied every aspect of the steel business, developed relationships with suppliers and customers, and positioned himself as an indispensable strategic partner rather than just an employee. When the opportunity came to lead his own company, he was ready because he had been thinking and acting like a steel magnate for years before he became one. The compound effect of this consciousness is extraordinary because it influences every micro decision you make throughout your day. When you consistently act as if you have already won, you make thousands of small choices that align with success rather than mediocrity. You wake up earlier because successful people value their time. You read more because successful people continuously expand their knowledge. You exercise consistently because successful people understand that physical energy supports mental performance. You network strategically because successful people know that relationships are the foundation of all achievement. These micro decisions compound over time to create macro results that seem miraculous to outside observers, but are simply the inevitable outcome of consistent consciousness applied over extended periods. This is why success often appears to happen suddenly after years of apparent struggle. The struggle was not wasted time, it was preparation time during which consciousness was being developed and skills were being refined. Now let us explore how this principle applies to developing what I call strategic patience, the ability to work toward long-term goals while maintaining motivation and momentum in the present moment. When you act as if you have already won, you develop a unique relationship with time. You understand that success is inevitable, so you can afford to be patient with the process while being urgent with your actions. Mahatma Gandhi demonstrated this consciousness throughout his campaign for Indian independence. He acted not like someone who hoped to free his country someday, but like someone who knew that freedom was inevitable and was simply working through the process of making it manifest. This consciousness allowed him to maintain his vision and strategy through decades of apparent setbacks and slow progress. He was patient with the timeline but relentless with his principles and actions. Gandhi's approach reveals another crucial aspect of this consciousness. It must be rooted in principle rather than just ambition. When you act as if you have already won, you are not just visualizing material success. You are embodying the character and integrity that makes you worthy of that success. This alignment between your vision and your values creates a powerful resonance that accelerates your progress while ensuring that your success is sustainable and meaningful. The practical application of strategic patience involves what psychologists call process focus versus outcome focus. Instead of obsessing over when your goals will be achieved, you focus on executing the daily and weekly processes that make achievement inevitable. You measure your progress by the consistency of your actions, rather than just the appearance of your results. Here is a transformational daily practice that embodies these principles. Every evening before sleep, spend 5 minutes mentally reviewing your day from the perspective of someone who has already achieved your most important goals. Ask yourself, did I think, speak, and act today in ways that aligned with my highest vision? What evidence did I create today that my success is becoming reality? How can I embody my vision even more fully tomorrow? This practice programs your subconscious mind to continue working on your goals while you sleep, and ensures that you wake up with the consciousness of victory rather than the consciousness of struggle. The sleep programming aspect of this practice is based on solid neuroscience research, showing that your brain consolidates and integrates new information during sleep cycles. When you go to sleep thinking like someone who has already won, your brain spends the night strengthening the neural pathways associated with success, consciousness, and creative problem solving. Alexander the Great conquered most of the known world by the age of 30 because he thought like a world conqueror from childhood. His father, Philip of Macedonia, raised him to believe that he was destined for greatness, and Alexander internalized this consciousness so completely that conquering vast territories seemed natural rather than impossible. He did not hope to build an empire, he knew he would build an empire, and focused his energy on strategy and execution rather than motivation and doubt. Alexander's story illustrates the power of environmental programming in developing success consciousness. The people around you, the books you read, the media you consume, and the conversations you have all contribute to shaping your internal programming. When you act as if you have already won, you naturally begin gravitating toward people, resources, and experiences that reinforce that consciousness, while distancing yourself from influences that promote limitation and scarcity thinking. This brings us to what I call social proof acceleration. When you consistently act as if you have already won, other people begin treating you differently. They respond to your confidence, seek your opinions, and offer you opportunities that they would not extend to someone operating from insecurity or desperation. This changed social feedback loop reinforces your new identity and creates external momentum that matches your internal transformation. The key to authentic implementation of this principle is understanding that confidence and arrogance are completely different energies. True confidence, the kind that comes from acting as if you have already won, is rooted in service, growth, and contribution. Arrogance is rooted in insecurity, competition, and ego. When you embody authentic success consciousness, you become more generous, more patient, and more focused on helping others succeed because you operate from abundance rather than scarcity. Benjamin Franklin exemplified this distinction throughout his remarkable career as an inventor, diplomat, and founding father. Franklin acted with the authority of someone who had already earned the right to shape history, but he maintained intellectual humility and genuine curiosity about learning from others. He understood that true mastery involves continuous growth rather than defensive protection of what you think you already know. Franklin's approach reveals another sophisticated aspect of success consciousness: the integration of confidence with curiosity. When you act as if you have already won, you are not claiming to know everything, you are claiming to be capable of figuring out whatever you need to know. This consciousness makes you more willing to ask questions, seek mentorship, and experiment with new approaches because your security comes from your adaptability rather than your current knowledge. Let me share with you an advanced technique for accelerating this transformation that combines visualization with embodied action. I call it the Future Self-Integration Protocol. Once a week, spend 30 minutes in deep visualization. where you step completely into the consciousness of your future successful self. Feel how this person feels, think how they think, and see the world through their eyes. Notice their posture, their breathing, their energy levels, and their emotional state. Then, without breaking that state, identify 3 specific actions you can take in the coming week that this future version of yourself would definitely take. Make these actions concrete and measurable. Perhaps your future self would have a specific conversation, invest in a particular skill development opportunity, or establish a new productive routine. Commit to taking those actions while maintaining the consciousness of your future self. This protocol works because it bridges the gap between visualization and action, between imagination and implementation. It prevents the common trap of using visualization as a substitute for action rather than as a catalyst for action. When done consistently, this practice literally rewires your brain to operate from higher levels of consciousness while taking more effective action in the physical world. The compound effect of this consciousness on your decision-making capacity cannot be overstated. Every day, you face dozens of micro-decisions that either move you toward your vision or away from it. When you act as if you have already won, these decisions become obvious rather than difficult. You naturally choose the option that aligns with your highest vision, because that choice feels natural and automatic, rather than forced or disciplined. This automation of good decision-making is one of the most powerful benefits of success consciousness. It reduces what psychologists call decision fatigue and frees up mental energy for creative thinking and strategic planning. Instead of spending emotional energy on basic choices like whether to exercise, what to eat, how to spend your evening, or whether to invest in your education, these decisions become systematized expressions of your identity. Julius Caesar demonstrates this principle in his famous decision to cross the Rubicon River, which committed him to either conquering Rome or dying in the attempt. Caesar did not spend months agonizing over this decision because he had already decided years earlier what kind of leader he intended to become. When the moment came, he acted in accordance with his predetermined identity rather than his temporary circumstances. Caesar's decisive action reveals another crucial aspect of acting as if you have already won. It eliminates the internal conflict between who you are and who you want to become. Most people struggle with motivation because they are constantly battling between their current identity and their desired identity. When you successfully embody your future self, this conflict disappears and action becomes natural rather than forced. Your support of this channel through subscription helps us reach more people who are ready to transform their relationship with success and achievement. The principles we explore here are not just theories. They are practical tools that work when applied consistently. I encourage you to subscribe and join our community of individuals committed to becoming the highest version of themselves. Now, let us examine how this principle specifically enhances your ability to create and manage wealth over the long term. True wealth consciousness understands that money is simply a measurement of the value you create in the marketplace. When you act as if you are already wealthy, you focus on becoming more valuable rather than just accumulating more currency. You invest in your skills, your relationships, your systems, and your knowledge because these assets compound in value over time. John D. Rockefeller became the wealthiest person in modern history by thinking like someone who already understood the principles of wealth creation long before he had any significant money. As a young bookkeeper, Rockefeller studied successful businessmen, learned their strategies, and began making small investments that reflected his understanding of value creation and compound growth. He acted like an investor and business owner, even when he was still an employee. Rockefeller's approach illustrates the wealth-building power of what economists call asymmetric risk investments that have limited downside but unlimited upside potential. When you act as if you are already wealthy, you naturally gravitate toward these asymmetric opportunities because you think like someone who understands how wealth is actually created rather than someone who is just trying to get by financially. The practical application of wealth consciousness involves several key behavioral shifts. First, you begin automating your investments so that wealth building happens consistently, regardless of your mood or market conditions. Second, you focus on developing skills that have unlimited income potential, rather than just trading time for money. Third, you build multiple streams of income so that your financial security does not depend on any single source. Fourth, you think in terms of decades rather than months when making financial decisions. These behavioral shifts compound over time to create what financial advisors call the wealth spiral, a self-reinforcing cycle where your assets generate income that you reinvest to generate more assets. But the wealth spiral begins in consciousness before it manifests in your bank account. You must think like a wealthy person before you can act like one consistently enough to become one actually. This brings us to the story of Isaac Newton, who revolutionized our understanding of physics and mathematics by thinking like someone who already understood the fundamental laws governing the universe. Newton did not conduct experiments to see if gravity might exist. He observed phenomena and worked to understand the principles that made those phenomena inevitable. This consciousness allowed him to discover laws that had been operating for millions of years but had never been articulated systematically. Newton's scientific approach reveals another sophisticated application of acting as if you have already won. It develops what psychologists call systems thinking rather than event thinking. Most people react to individual events without understanding the underlying systems that create those events. When you operate from the consciousness of someone who has already mastered a domain, you naturally focus on understanding and leveraging the systems, rather than just responding to the symptoms. This systems perspective is crucial for building sustainable wealth, because wealth is not created by individual transactions. It is created by understanding and participating in the systems that generate consistent value over time. This might involve building businesses that solve recurring problems, creating intellectual property that generates ongoing royalties, or investing in assets that appreciate while producing income. The psychological foundation for systems thinking is what cognitive scientists call delayed gratification, coupled with compound awareness. You develop the ability to choose long-term benefits over short-term pleasures, while understanding how small, consistent actions compound into major results over time. This combination creates what Warren Buffett calls the snowball effect, where early investments of time, energy, and money gather momentum and size as they compound over years and decades. Here is a specific weekly practice that will help you develop both wealth consciousness and systems thinking. Every Sunday, allocate 2 hours to what I call strategic wealth planning. During this time, review your financial progress from the previous week. Analyze your income and expenses from a systems perspective and identify 3 specific actions you can take in the coming week to increase your value creation capacity. The key is to approach this planning session from the consciousness of someone who already understands how wealth is built. Ask yourself, how would someone who has already achieved financial freedom analyze these numbers? What patterns would they identify? What adjustments would they make? What opportunities would they pursue? Then implement their insights with the confidence of someone who knows these strategies work, because you have already seen the results. This approach transforms weekly planning from a chore into a strategic advantage because you are thinking like someone who has already mastered the principles of wealth creation. Over time, this weekly practice develops your financial intelligence and decision-making capabilities while building the practical habits that make wealth inevitable. Genghis Khan conquered the largest contiguous empire in human history by thinking like someone who already understood how to unite diverse tribes and coordinate vast military campaigns. Khan did not hope to become a great conqueror. He studied successful military leaders, learned their strategies, and then applied those principles on a scale that seemed impossible to his contemporaries. His consciousness of inevitable victory allowed him to maintain cohesion and momentum through challenges that would have defeated someone operating from doubt or desperation. Khan's strategic approach demonstrates another powerful application of success consciousness. It enables you to coordinate complex long-term projects that require sustained effort and multiple phases of development. Whether you are building a business, developing expertise in a field, or creating substantial wealth, success requires the ability to maintain champions. Your mind has been forged a little stronger today, but the real test isn't what you learned, it's what you do with it. Take action, dominate your day, and remember, we're not just building better thoughts, we're forging unstoppable lives. The forge doesn't stop, and neither do you. If this episode hit you where it counts, subscribe to Mental Forge Academy and join the Brotherhood of Champions who refuse to settle for ordinary. Go transform, strike while the mind is hot,